friends, so this video is going to cover the personal statement for medical school applications. What is it, what is the purpose, and how do you write it? So the personal statement or personal comment, you get 5,300 characters for both AMCAS or the MD or the allopathic medical school application process, as well as AECOMAS or the DO or osteopathic medical school application process. And you can absolutely use the same personal statement for both applications. What is it? This is a persuasive essay on how do you know you want to pursue medicine, how was this interest sparked, and how did you test or explore this interest in medicine? What is the purpose? Becoming a physician is a time-intensive and expensive process for both you and your prospective medical school. Schools want to know that you're going to come in with some good reasons for wanting to commit close to a decade of your life to just the educational aspect of this career, what your motivations are that are going to keep you going on this path when things get tough, and what you've done to make sure you know what you're getting yourself into. Directly from an admissions committee member at the University of Maryland School of Medicine, a good personal statement won't get you in if you don't have a competitive application, but a bad one can ruin your application even with competitive credentials. I like to think of the personal statement as being a little bit like asking someone to be in an exclusive relationship with you. You can be an amazing human being, but that doesn't necessarily mean you're compatible or even deeply interested in the person you're trying to ask to be your partner. In the same way, amazing students could just as easily go on to graduate school or to be engineers or writers or nonprofit organizers or politicians with the right experiences. If you don't have a compelling reason for wanting to invest this time and effort into this career, a school might not want to give their time and resources to you as opposed to someone who has tested their interest and desire to pursue medicine. As I said before, this is a persuasive essay, and as such it needs some essential elements: a thesis or a theme. So, what is the point of your essay? What is the argument that you're trying to make? And what is it that you're trying to convince the reader of? And the answer to this right off the bat needs to be something along the lines of how I know I want to be a physician, or I want to be a physician to serve others and improve their health. The second major element necessary for a persuasive essay is supporting evidence. These theoretically are experiences that either sparked or reaffirmed the desire to be a physician. Note that I did not say that this is a creative writing essay. Unless you did something insanely unique and extraordinary, nothing about your stories or your descriptions of your stories will be 100% unique to you. But that's okay, they don't have to be. Remember, the goal of this essay is not to win a literary award with your style of writing. It is to convince an admissions committee member that you know that you want to be a physician and that you've tested that desire. The strength of your essay will come from what you did, what you thought about it, and the conclusions you took away from it, not from your descriptive imagery. So things like extended metaphors and hooks are 100% not necessary. What I mean by extended metaphors, this often gets confused with a theme. Again, the theme should be, I want to be a physician because ... or I want to be a physician to serve others or improve their health. If your answer to what is your theme is medicine is like a video game, or people are like boxes with unusual surprises, there's a 99% chance that this will distract and confuse the reader, which is the last thing that we want to do in this essay. So a theme is not the same thing as an extended metaphor, and extended metaphors are 100% not necessary. Now, what do I mean by a hook? A hook, in the way that I'm using the term hook, is anything written for the sole purpose of grabbing the reader's attention. 9 out of 10 times, when you write with the purpose of trying to grab the reader's attention, this generally confuses the reader, because you're likely confused yourself as you're trying to make this metaphor or hook work. And then the writing that follows is you trying to conform the narrative to that hook. When you write, go in with the intention of writing so that everything written either provides substance to the story, the reflection, or how this reflection reaffirmed your desire to commit yourself to medicine. So write with the intention of providing content. If you happen to write all solid content and you still have space, and then you think of something that might grab the reader's attention while revising, and that something happens to actually fit the narrative, then try it out. But if you're putting your fingers to the keyboard with the intention of writing something attention-grabby, and not with the intention of contributing substance to your argument, there's a 99% chance that this will not read well. Lastly, make sure that you're writing with the understanding that the goal of a physician is to improve health, and that the other attributes about being a physician are a bonus. What I mean by this is that a lot of people write that they want to be a physician because they want to practice empathy. And while that's great to some degree because we do need empathetic physicians, there are plenty of other jobs out there that allow you to practice empathy that don't cost hundreds of thousands of dollars to train. If you're looking for a way to practice empathy, well then why not social worker? Why not a therapist? The same goes for the cliche of, I want to solve puzzles. It definitely helps if the physician feels rewarded by mental stimulation, but then what differentiates you from someone who wants to be a detective, or a scientist, or go to grad school for physiology or biology? The same goes for the claim of, I want to be a physician to work with the underserved. Again, we need physicians who want to work with the underserved, but then why not go into policymaking? Why not be a nonprofit organizer? My point is that while writing, you need to understand what about being a physician is unique to these other careers, which is that they are the leaders on the team to improving patients' health. Everything else is extremely valid as bonuses, but they should not be your thesis. So how do we write this? I sketched out a bit of an outline of a formula that I've noticed people either intentionally or unintentionally employing pretty frequently to write very effective personal statements. That being said, there is definitely more than one way to go about crafting an effective narrative beyond the ways that I describe and advise. This is just an example of a way to approach it that helped a lot of people get in and can help others get some structure to organizing their thoughts. So what is the formula? In the introduction, start off with whatever experience or sequence of experiences initially planted that seed of the idea of, I might want to do this. Ideally, by the end of the paragraph, though, you tell me what kept you going on that path. The next 2 to 4 body paragraphs following are ideally experiences or stories where you show how you tested this desire to pursue medicine, prepared yourself better for medical school, or tested how suitable your personality is for medicine. So maybe you want to tell the reader how you went out and sought clinical experience. And while you were out there, what kinds of patients you saw, what kinds of lives they lived, and how they were affected by their health issues. More than one story can come from the same entry, works and activities-wise, but the body paragraphs must include some degree of clinical exposure. It's really hard to make the argument that you want to be a physician without adequately demonstrating that you know what physicians or other healthcare providers do and how they impact patients' lives. At the end of every story, write a sentence or two reflecting on the story, and then another sentence or so relating it back to why medicine. And then wrap up with a conclusion paragraph recapping all of your reflections nice and succinctly, and then articulating your vision of how to incorporate what you've learned into your future career. And a little nugget of wisdom from my special master's program advisor, who serves on the admissions committee for the schools that I'm admitted to: make your reflections quotable. It's not uncommon for admissions committee members to write little notes or reports on their opinions on whether they support or are against extending an interview invite or an acceptance. It's also not uncommon for adcoms to look for things in the essays to just copy and paste into this report to support their case. If you articulate your reflections such that they can powerfully stand alone, and then conveniently be able to be copied and pasted into this report supporting a vote to extend you an interview invite or an acceptance, you're kind of doing yourself and your reviewer a favor. So a little elaboration on this formula. In the introduction, what does that initial spark or motivation look like? For a lot of people, this can look like a personal experience being sick or injured and your experience with the healthcare system. Did you have a sick relative? Could you see the changes that they went through, either from the person that they were before the health issue into during the health issue, or during the health issue into after they recovered? Did you have experiences or observations in the community where you saw a need for greater resources aimed at healthcare, or where lack of resources related to healthcare dramatically affected the livelihoods of those communities? Or was this a gradual process? Hopefully, by the end of the first paragraph, we have an idea of both, 1, what planted the idea of medicine as a career in your head, and 2, what kept you venturing down that path. The body paragraphs are your evidence. It's easiest to talk about why medicine when talking about patient interactions. But again, these are just recommendations, and plenty of people have deviated plenty from this formula and still been very successful. But if you do go with a patient interaction, be specific about the patient. Give enough description about them to humanize them, and help the reader identify someone in their life that they've known whom this patient reminds them of. And be specific about the health issue that they're facing. What are the implications that this issue could have on this person's life? And then, who cared for them, and how? What was the process of diagnosing or treating them, if you were privy to that process? What are the impacts or implications of the treatment provided? How did treatment make the most likely outcome differ from the potential impacts it could have had otherwise? Emphasize who provided care. If you were the care provider, show and tell what the experience was like. If you were observing care provided by a physician, your thoughts and reactions to various events should be included. End with a reflection on the story and relate it back to how it further commits you on this path to medicine. Be specific and be quotable. In the conclusion, reflect on all your experiences, but now as a journey or as an integrated, cohesive picture. And then using those previous reflections, articulate specifically how those summarized reflections compel you to pursue this vision of your career as a physician, or what this vision of your career entails. So some last notes before we get into how to actually approach writing the personal statement. The first 1 to 5 drafts are inevitably going to be garbage. So just write all your thoughts and ignore the character count for the first several drafts. Solidify what content you deem to be essential, and then work on trimming your characters. For the vast majority of people, the best parts of your personal statement will wind up coming from the editing process after you've laid down the foundations of what you wanted to say, and the editing just refines those thoughts. So my general approach to writing, if this is applicable for you, write the disadvantaged or the other impactful experiences essay first. It gets the trauma dumping out of the way and keeps it out of the personal statement. Going back to the dating analogy, in the same way you wouldn't want to share your deep, dark backstories on a first date in the first 20 minutes while you're trying to establish a connection, you probably don't want your essay on how I know I want to be a physician and why to be full of content that makes the reader question whether your trauma is so unresolved that you can't designate the appropriate time and place for sharing it. Your struggles and challenges may be an important part of your story, and I don't want to negate and invalidate that. But this is a question of whether or not we want to give those struggles front and center stage and a spotlight on your application, as they would in the personal statement. Once you've mostly solidified content on your other impactful experiences essay, I started with an exercise recommended by the NIH PreMed advisors, where you list all your activities by name and write 2 to 3 sentences detailing what you did, any stories that stood out, and a lesson or attribute that you learned, or a competency that you learned or demonstrated during this experience. And then allow that to be the basis of where you start for both your works and activities and your personal statement simultaneously. As you reflect and expand on this list of experiences and those 3-ish sentences that will evolve to become your works and activities, start brainstorming and narrowing down to maybe 5 or 6 stories that you think might be good to include in your personal statement. As you develop your works and activities, start drafting your personal statement with various combinations of 3 or 4 of those stories that you narrowed down to. And then as you write, save every draft. You never know which combination is going to be resurrected later, what nuggets of gold you left in while drunk writing at 3 a.m., and what can be recycled later for a most meaningful experiences blurb or a secondary essay. So this is an example from my application as a low stats student who went on to get accepted at a top 20 allopathic medical school. In my introduction, I tell a story about how a very close friend of mine struggled with a treatment-resistant mental illness, and how she struggled with it in the 2 subsequent years. In yellow, I'm highlighting the reflection, even though her providers couldn't save her life, they bought us time. And how, while obviously I wish we'd gotten more time with her, it's hard to even articulate how valuable those 2 years extended with her were to me. And then in pink, I articulate how that reflection leads back to medicine, that knowing how invaluable that time extended with her was, I want to devote my life to giving to others what those 2 extra years with Heather gave to me. In the first body paragraph, we see what I mean by being specific about the patient. I highlight how she's an uninsured domestic abuse survivor fleeing her ex-partner and in the early stages of reclaiming her life. I highlight her health issue and the concerns over the broader impacts of it on her life. So she came in with a hernia, but a CT showed a huge mass on her uterus, and now she's sharing her fears about fertility and cost of treatment as someone who is uninsured. We can see how Dr. Yates is addressing both her physical and socioeconomic needs, connecting her with a social worker and a list of specialists who would be willing to see her without insurance. We can also see where I'm an active part of the story, sharing tears of hope with her at the end of the visit. And then again, in yellow, I reflect on experiences as someone who has had exposure to financial vulnerability and domestic turbulence, and how my own experiences help me understand just how impactful Dr. Yates' intervention was to her journey in reclaiming her life, and how easily things could have gone differently without treating both her socioeconomic issues as well as the health-related issues. And then in pink, I just articulate how Dr. Yates empowering Jade further inspires me to similarly empower others. In the last body paragraph, again, Fred, who is currently a retired physician writing a book, talks about how his struggles with the brain fog caused by his rare disease sunk him into a huge depression that nearly prematurely ended his career. The intervention is his physician's words of "don't be afraid to live," as well as Fred's physician connecting him with the NIH and my PI so we can enroll him in a clinical trial that I'm helping evaluate data for. The impacts of physicians on Fred's life are apparent when Fred shows you the text of the book that he's writing about his experiences as a Black man growing up in the South during desegregation and his journey to becoming a physician, where he's pointing out in the text how his style of writing changes depending on whether or not he's on the drug versus off the drug during the washout period. In yellow, I highlight how I get both the stories of the patients on this trial about how transformative having a physician who understands their rare diseases on their lives, on top of getting measurable metrics via their quality of life scores improving throughout the open label period where we know for sure the patients are on the drug. And then in pink, I reflect on how this reinforces that my research now and my future efforts contributing to research better facilitate other physicians to confidently say to their patients, "Don't be afraid to live." Finally, the conclusion paragraph. In yellow, we recap a lot of the lessons that we learned along the way. I learned that more than loving to learn, I love that my education can contribute to improved care. And jade teaches me how expansive the role of a physician can be. And then in pink, this is that quotable ending where I sum up in one sentence why I want to be a physician. Knowing the value that those 2 extra years with Heather had in my life, the impacts of Dr. Yates's thoroughness on Jade's life, and the reinvigorated joy that Fred has for living, I reflect on my journey as an aspiring physician with continually renewed commitment to one day give to someone what Heather's physician gave to her, what Dr. Yates gave to Jade, and what my PI gives to Fred: time, hope, and quality of life. This is just a bird's eye view of what that structure looks like overall. We can kind of see how every story has a reflection, and how does this reflection reaffirm or better inform my desire to go into medicine. We also see how the events compound and integrate with each other, and how they all lead up to supporting that last conclusion. Lastly, we also see by the proportions of the colors where I spend the most time and characters, and they tend to be less in the descriptions and more on the reflections and how it relates back to medicine. So that's it for this video. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope this was beneficial to you in your journey. If it was and you want to see more, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a like, and I hope to see you in the next video.